Hey friends, so the video you're about to watch is all about the INTP cognitive functions. And the reason this video is a little bit wonky is because it is an explanation that I put at the end of the chatbot that I was working on. And I've decided to just make all of this free for you here on YouTube to learn more about the cognitive functions and to start to get a glimpse of what it looks like for me to support you and coach you and do some of the one-on-one support that I do. So what you're about to hear is the cognitive function explainer of what I do after the interviews. After I do profiling sessions, I explain cognitive functions to people. So I'm creating one for each personality type, starting with the INTPs, sharing with you here. And as usual, afterwards, go check out in the links below, go to DOPEamine.life, sign up for our email list, and you'll get more information, more advice for how to become a more excellent INTP and actually put in the work and start to grow and develop as a person in health, career, relationships, etc. So I hope you'll enjoy this. And if you have any feedback, I would appreciate it in the comments below. But mostly if you want to join, kind of our inner circle, go ahead and sign up for our email list and get involved a little bit deeper into what it means to be an INTP. We're going to go through the cognitive functions, which are the main ways that your brain wiring is put together. This is called your cognitive functions stack. The 4 functions in your stack that are defining basically the way that you move through life. So for an INTP, that is introverted thinking, extroverted intuition, introverted sensing, and extroverted feeling. Now, everybody has 8 functions, but these 4 functions are the main ones that we want to focus on when we're thinking about our growth. And really, it's the top 2 that we want to spend most of our time in or working on, because all of these functions are connected. So working on our strengths improves our weaknesses. And I know we get kind of caught up in having to improve our weaknesses, or sometimes people think about what are called shadow functions, and it gets too complex. And there are reasons for that as an INTP, that we want to get to the complex nature of things. So I am also an INTP, which means you get a little bit of an extra treat here because I get to compare a little bit of my experience and share more of my personal experience with you as a fellow INTP to share what the experience is like. So I want you to think of your mind as a 4-passenger car. Now, this is a concept called the car model, which is based on personality hackers. Basically, this model is theirs. A lot of my training is from them. I've learned so much from personality hackers, so definitely go check them out if you have not already. Introverted thinking is your first driver function, followed by extroverted intuition, then introverted sensing, then extroverted feeling. So we're going to start with introverted thinking, which is your main dominant driver function. This is the function that you spend most of your time in, and this is an unconscious function. The left side of the car, the driver and the 3-year-old, are going to be the unconscious side of your car. This is basically, we're not necessarily aware of how much and how often we use this function. And the same thing with extroverted feeling. Our 3-year-old, we're unaware of how little we use this function and in what ways they end up showing up, right? So our introverted thinking function is all about cold analytical data. It's about information. It's about what makes sense. And because it's an introverted attitude, the introverted attitude is typically more personal. It's more personal interpretation. It's subjective. So it's looking at information, but it's making a subjective interpretation based on what personally makes sense to you or what personally makes sense to me, right? So we take all of our time to cull all of the data. We figure out as much as we can about a situation. Then we select what makes the most sense to us. And that's the way I look at it. I like to look at introverted thinking as selecting which data makes the most sense for us, for our situation, for our lives, for an understanding of the universe of our lives or what we're looking to figure out. And I think that is the biggest challenge for INTPs and any introverted thinking user, is the understanding that this is a subjective process, despite it being about data and information. And what it is about taking all of this information and being able to, to categorize it, to understand it, to lay it out, to piece it together. And when paired with other functions, it operates in different ways. But by itself, it is namely just about objective data, everything that it can find that it deems to be objective data, which is subjective, but whatever. Um, it's it's everything that is supporting what it is that we're working on or what we're working towards, right? So you think of it as like the parts of a car. If you take a car apart or a remote control apart, it's all of the parts of how something works. And if you look at the intricate details, you can sort of look at how introverted thinking works. It's understanding all of these parts and where the parts go, how the parts are used, and how to get the most out of those parts. So, introverted thinking is just looking at what is and really taking it for its intended usage. So, for introverted thinking, it is all about, being able to share the truth. It's all because it's also about truth, it's about integrity, it's about your personal sense of identity and individualism. So my personal identity is wrapped around what I think. What am I working on? What's important to me? What are the thoughts that come to mind? And I personally think of thoughts as sparks in my mind, and then I apply language to it because language is also incredibly important for introverted thinking. The language that we use, whether it's specific language or being more versatile with language, the intention behind language is incredibly important. So the thoughts, how we convey those thoughts, and the intention, what you're trying to say, how you use those words are incredibly important for introverted thinking. When I talk about integrity, when I talk about individualism, it's about what makes sense to us. And what makes sense to us will always supersede anything else if we allow it. And usually, in most cases, it still will. But as we go and develop, it'll become integrated with other functions, and you'll have a greater sense of being able to flex and flow with your data and information and how you use it and how you care about it. So hopefully, all of that makes sense. That's just sort of a reductive explanation of introverted thinking because it is quite complex, and it's about complex thinking. It's about being able to dive deep into complex thoughts, organize a lot of information in your mind, as opposed to extroverted thinking, which the TJs tend to use, do use, which is more about getting information managed outside of themselves. So writing things down. Most of the time, we don't have to write things down. We're able to retain a lot of information, which is an incredibly empowering and powerful tool to use. And sometimes that means that introverted thinkers, INTPs and ISTPs, can have a bit of a superiority complex. And I say that lovingly. I've done a lot of videos around this. But me being direct like that is an example of using introverted thinking. I'm just sharing my truth. And sharing my truth with you is how I tend to connect with people. And I'll talk about that as we get to extroverted feeling a little bit towards the end. But being able to share direct truths is important for INTPs and for ISTPs as well, to, because that's what we value. And that's a part of our emotional experience, is being able to express what we think and what makes sense to us. So the secondary function, the co-pilot, is called extroverted intuition. Now, extroverted intuition is about going out into the world and learning and playing, being optimistic, looking at possibilities, and doing that with other people typically, or in new situations. It doesn't always have to be with other people, but it has to be some sense of novelty or some experience in the outside world. So, researching on the internet is not extroverted intuition. Extroverted intuition is about actually experiencing the unknown and being willing to experience the unknown. It's about advanced pattern recognition. So, intuition in general is about pattern recognition, but extroverted intuition is about what we immediately experience and how we experience it in the moment. And extroverted intuition can future pace, but it won't be as far ahead. It's going to be a little bit more in the moment. Whereas introverted intuition, the one that NFJs tend to use, is about thinking far ahead, months or even years ahead in terms of the future. Extroverted intuition is going to be thinking a little bit more about what's happening in the moment right now. What am I experiencing right now? And that could be as simple as walking down a street you've never walked down before and gaining new information just from that experience because you're connecting disparate ideas. It's about the connections that we see in reality, in what we experience. So, going out into the world, experiencing as many new things as possible, so you can see how all of these disparate things connect in some way. You're looking for the commonalities and patterns in the human experience and in our sense of reality. And sometimes that manifests in a sense of spirituality. Sometimes that manifests in a sense of just optimism and looking at the future as like new possibilities. And it's very much okay to think that. This matches very nicely with introverted thinking, which is, you think of extroverted intuition as a very additive process. Introverted thinking is a very deductive process. So if you're adding new things to your experience all the time, introverted thinking does the work of sort of chopping things away and saying like, okay, I don't need to do this anymore. This pattern makes sense. This is the thing. This is the thing. This is the thing. You're making decisions. Whereas your extroverted intuition is about learning, and learning is about experience, and experience is about getting out there. So as an introvert, this is an important side of you. Everyone has an introverted side and an extroverted side. So it's important to get outside and go experience new things. So I think of Dr. House all the time. He's often touted as an INTP, where every episode is basically an example of this, where he has a big problem. He has to try to diagnose a patient, something he's maybe never seen before. And most of the time, they spend the entire episode trying to figure out what's going on. He's sort of trying to use his thinking and everything that he already knows to try to solve the problem. But usually, what ends up solving the problem is going and experiencing something different. And it's like he's in the shower and he looks at a plunger and he's just like, oh no, I figured it out. And, it's connecting disparate ideas. It's allowing your mind to relax. It's allowing your mind to be present and get peace from your own mind by just being in the moment and being playful and letting your mind activate in a sense. So when you're stuck and you're working on a problem, as an introverted thinking, you're thinking, you're trying to work it out. And once you feel like you get stuck and you hit a wall, that's usually when you need to get out and go do something different. And usually when you're in the shower or you're out experiencing something or you're playing with your friends, I say playing with your friends like you're 12, but when you're out like doing something and having a joyful new novel experience, there's a new disparate idea that you might not know where it's coming from. And it's that feeling, it's that unexpected nature of the connection of ideas that is what excites the INTP mind. That's what makes us intuitive. So we need to look for new experiences in order to make the connections in our mind to the things we already care and are working on. So, doing new things does not detract from our thinking and what we're already working on. If anything, it actually lends to it. So I think that's incredibly important to remember when you're sort of needing to grow and develop as a person, to get into this side of yourself to grow as an intuitive person, as an extroverted intuitive, as an NP. The tertiary function, which is called introverted sensing, it's also referred to as the 10-year-old. I should say that that TI is known as accuracy, NE is known as exploration, and introverted sensing is known as memory. Now, accuracy and memory, introverted thinking and introverted sensing, can sometimes work together and get in cahoots. I'll explain a little bit of introverted sensing first before I explain that. So, introverted sensing gets into a space of the usual, and you can think of it as the opposite of extroverted intuition. The extroverted intuition wants novelty, it wants play, it wants new things, it wants to just connect dots. Where introverted sensing is the opposite. Introverted sensing wants routine, it wants rhythm, it wants tradition, it wants regular intervals, it wants something that feels safe, it wants that side of us wants to feel like everything's okay and that the future is secure and that what you're about to experience is a known experience, that you know what's going to happen and you feel comfort in that. And as I've explained in all sorts of videos that I've done for INTPs, the tertiary function is closest tied to our sense of ego. And so ego can sometimes get tied to what we already know, what we're familiar with. And if we are sometimes put into situations that are unfamiliar and we're forced to change a certain code that we've established or something that has been a through line in our lives, and suddenly we have to make a big change, it can be really hard to make a big change. It can be really hard to make that, to go forward in a way that feels safe and certain, and to have the bravery to use your intuition instead to, to adapt to a new situation. But sometimes that's easier said than done. We can get into what's called a cognitive loop and use that introverted sensing to, with paired with our introverted thinking, to convince ourselves to always stay safe and to not try new things. So introverted thinking can get into this space of assuming that they should not try anything new because everything new that they're going to try, like they've already done before. Like there's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new worth exploring. Like the new experience isn't going to yield anything, and it's not worth it. Or you think of a situation like you've gone to a restaurant one time and you were served a bad meal. And because of that one bad meal, you're never going to go to that restaurant again. Even though other people have said that it's a good experience and there are other things on the menu, and it could have been just that dish that was not good, or maybe you didn't like it because that's just not something you like. But you've decided to write off the entire restaurant and write off that experience because of the one time. And introverted sensing, because of the nickname memory, is usually about the connections and the through lines that we have throughout our life. So one experience is not enough to convince yourself to never do the same thing again or to do something different in a similar scenario. So to try something different isn't necessarily helpful in your own mind. So another example would be to, you kind of go to the same restaurant every week because it's the one thing that you know that you like, and you are afraid to try something new because you just don't think it could get any better or something like that, right? Or, basically some sort of personal logic that you've created to support never trying anything new. And I think that is important to be aware of because that's usually when we need some sort of intuition in our lives. That means going to a new restaurant, driving down a different street. That means like taking a different path to work. That might mean, playing a new video game instead of the same one that you've played 40 times for the last 2 months, right? Trying something different, reading a different book, trying a different genre. It's a matter of taste testing. Extroverted intuition is taste testing. And a lot of INTPs get really stuck in feeling like they don't know where to go in their lives because we feel like we have to pick one thing. And sometimes that's that introverted sensing, understanding the narrative that we've been fed through our lives as, particularly as Americans. We get fed this idea that you have to pick something and you have to stick with it, and you got to do that for the rest of your life. And if introverted sensing had its way, that's what it would do. It would pick a thing, it would get in its hole, it would sit there, and it would be safe and get in its turtle shell, and the world would not touch it. It would let it do its thing. So it's important to, again, the 10-year-old, can sometimes be right. It's important to sometimes check in with the 10-year-old. So again, our SI is an interpretation of reality. It's an interpretation of our memory, I should say, because it's our personal experience. So introverted sensing it's not necessarily literally what happened. It's oftentimes an interpretation of what we've experienced in our life. So actually, extroverted intuition, doing more things, allows for introverted sensing to get a little bit more work to do. And you have more things to review. And that's really how we engage our introverted sensing. So there's a lot of INTPs, myself included, that will listen to the same music that they've listened to since they were a teenager, or the same movies or something like that.
And I don't do that with movies so much, but I do that with music all the time. I will listen to old albums, and that will give me a sense of joy. And that's the thing. You got to listen for what gives you sort of an energy hit when you need it. So introverted sensing, that sense of memory, is sensing. It's sensation. It's your senses. It is what you experience or what you have experienced. Your thoughts, feelings, what you've touched, smell, see, hear, your sense of balance, your experience that you've experienced before. So music can do that. So, songs that you've heard. Just last night, we were watching Schitt's Creek, and there was a song that came on that reminded me of like the early 2000s. I was dating someone. It took me back to a moment. And introverted sensing is in a way, there are totems in our lives, whether that's music, it's an object, it's a situation, that will take us back to that space, and it will remind us. So we'll kind of zone out, and we won't notice the world in front of us anymore. We'll be taken back to that scenario and almost be able to walk the garden of the past and walk through a situation and be able to look into a room and experience it again, or at least our interpretation of what we've experienced, and see it again. So when I hear that song that I talked about from last night, I was taken back to a moment with a former partner, and I'm in that room again, and I know what it smells like. I know what it feels like. I know what it's, and as you get better at using this side of yourself, like more of the picture comes in view. So this side, this 10-year-old side, which I'm spending a lot of time on, how much? Okay, we're good. um, is an important part of our growth. And I think I'm stuck on it because I'm doing a lot of my own growth around introverted sensing right now. And introverted sensing, needs a lot of attention. And not as much as the dominant two functions, but every once in a while it's going to call for its own needs. And the way to trigger introverted sensing is through meditation, usually. Meditation or some sort of a totem. So, again, like music, or maybe you have a photograph or an item that will take you back to a moment. And it's a way of getting peace from your mind, similar to extroverted intuition. To whereas when you're experiencing new things and you're learning new things, you're able to, kind of let go of your thoughts and judgments, and your mind's not doing as much work. Your mind's just learning and taking things in. And it's the same thing with introverted sensing. We go back into our past situations to be able to learn things from it. So an example of that would also be like listening to an album and listening to it over and over again. And every time you listen to the album, you pay attention to a new instrument, or you pay attention to another section of it, or you realize that there's another part of this song that you didn't know was there before because you noticed it the second time around. And ISJs, the ones that use this as their dominant function, do this all the time. They repeat listens to things, or they repeat experiences so that they can cull new things from it. And as you get older and you use more introverted sensing in your life in a helpful, positive way, you'll start to review your life a little bit more. You'll start to learn about some of your own experiences, and, start to plant your feet a little bit and create a sense of security in your life, but still being willing to go out there and experience new things. So as long as you're not working in cahoots with your introverted thinking and ignoring novelty, then it's a healthy thing that you can use in your life. And we call it a 10-year-old because it's right sometimes. So it's okay to listen to it every once in a while and learn new things from that. And then we're going to wrap up on our extroverted feeling side of ourselves. The extroverted feeling is the 3-year-old. The 3-year-old is the baby in the back seat of the car. It's the unconscious side of ourselves. And a lot of INTPs have this ambition of wanting to be known, or it might manifest as being famous, or wanting to have a lot of friends, or be able to have connections in your life. And I think every INTP can relate to having these feelings every so often. It's not all the time, but there's something about wanting to be correct that is linked to this. Like, we love letting people know that we've worked on something. We love letting people know that we have the right answer, that we've figured this out already. And there's something to that that is connected to our extroverted feeling. Extroverted feeling is called harmony. Extroverted feeling is all about the connections in our mind that we make with other people. So, extroverted feeling is about getting people's needs met and making sure that they're taken care of. And for us, because it's a not so sophisticated part of ourselves, it can often manifest as something that arrives in extreme stress. So introverted sensing is something that can arrive in like day-to-day stress, where we kind of like shut ourselves out and kind of hermit up a little bit. Extroverted feeling can be this explosion of emotion because we don't know what to do with our feelings. Um, we maybe need some love and we haven't gotten enough love and attention, or we haven't given enough love and attention. And it's sort of manifesting as this like big burst of energy. And for an INTP, that can become very unruly if we're not using that regularly. So, like a 3-year-old, if you ignore a 3-year-old in the back seat, they're going to have a tantrum after a while. So you need to pay attention to it at least a few times a week to make sure that you're getting love and attention and making sure people's needs are met. So whereas with introverted thinking, we are very much self-focused. We are individualistic. We do what makes sense to us and, screw what anyone else thinks. This is the side of ourselves that needs to consider other people's needs and to consider what someone else wants. And whether that's someone close, usually that's someone close to us. And it's important to make sure that it stays that way. I think in extreme stress, we can get to a place of like blaming the entire world for not doing what they're supposed to do. Whereas if we kind of keep it zoomed in and focus on our family and our friends, we can have a better time of making sure that, we're getting the needs met of someone close to us and it's manageable and we can get some love from that person and someone can hold space for our thoughts and we can be seen as important to them, which is important to us as well. So often this 3-year-old can be a sense of our personal ambition. We want to change the world, we want to help the world, we want to be a teacher, we want to connect to people, we want to guide a room of people to be able to grow as a person. For me, doing DOPEamine is a manifestation of that. This is me using my thinking, using my understanding, using my knowledge of personality types to be able to give people some guidance, to be able to do some coaching, do some nurturing, create programs, create podcasts, create videos, and give people advice and make people feel good about themselves and make sure that they're taken care of and that they're loved through the work that I do. And the assumption is that an INTP needs to be a feeler in order to connect. And that's not true. For me, my information is how I connect with people. So introverted thinking is still in charge, but it's making sure that the extroverted feeler gets what they want. So it's like driving a 3-year-old to get some ice cream, but you also get to eat some ice cream, that kind of thing. So because the 3-year-old can't drive. If you let the 3-year-old drive, they're going to crash and everything's going to go crazy. But if you let introverted thinking say like, all right, well, I see the importance of extroverted feeling and helping other people, but I'm going to do it my way. And I'm going to do it my way, meaning that I'm going to do it by helping people with information or sharing some truth with them or lending them my type of thinking when they need it, not forcing it on them, because sometimes that's what we do as INTPs is we can force our thinking onto someone, and that's a bit too much as well. But listening for when someone needs our guidance or what needs our attention, or recording something and putting out there for someone else to find, or writing a book, or some sort of creating a seminar, or something where you can put your information out there in a place where someone actually needs it and not necessarily forcing it down someone's throat. So that's important to know. So extroverted feeling is about getting those needs met and making sure people are taken care of. And because we want love too. We want relationships. A lot of us want a partner. We have some ambitions about having a family and all of that stuff. But most of the time we need time to ourselves. Like I'm literally recording this in my car because I didn't have really enough time to myself lately, and I needed to carve that out for myself. So I'm in my car recording this, and why not? So I'm doing my part of like sharing my information, but I'm speaking it. And again, it's extroverted feeling. So it's about putting your thoughts and feelings out there. And that's the difference between just thinking an idea and keeping it in your brain and knowing all of this stuff, and then finding ways to put it out there for it to actually be useful for someone. So that's the difference. So we can keep it in our mind all we want, but it just lives there. And then when we die, it's useless because it's gone with our corpse, basically. But as you can tell, when I get into, I'm not just extroverted feeling, right? I'm not just being like emotional with you. I'm bringing my intuition along with it. I'm being playful. I'm making jokes. I'm being positive. I'm, doing the best that I can to just be, improving this. Like I don't write things down. I'm just saying what's in my mind, and I'm sharing this with a structure. Um, but the extroverted feeling sort of loosely defines the structure. The intuition kind of rolls with the punches, and then the introverted thinking is where all the information is coming from. And then my introverted sensing is actually keeping track of me doing this in a templated fashion. So I have one of these videos that I'm doing for each personality type. And that is the templated idea of introverted sensing, which is another aspect of introverted sensing, is like the templatizing of things, tradition, routine, doing something the same way over and over again. But I don't necessarily do everything the exact same way. I just recorded an INFJ one before this, and there was a slightly different structure. And sometimes I will change the wording, and sometimes I'll change whatever, because I still want to keep it interesting, right? I want to keep this fun. I want it to be unique for every personality type, but still have the similar structure. And, I'm not giving someone way too much more information than another person, and not giving too much advice more than another person. Does that make sense? So the last real thing is like, I want you to know that basically these functions don't operate in a silo. They don't operate in a vacuum by themselves. They're always working with another personality, with another cognitive function. So introverted thinking and extroverted feeling always works together. Even if it's unconscious, like an INTP wanting to be correct in a moment, or being upset that people are quote unquote stupid, that is extroverted feeling reacting. That is an extroverted feeling reaction. That is an emotional reaction. And I think it's important for INTPs in particular to know that our thinking is very much tied to our emotional experience. What we think about is what we care about. Otherwise, we wouldn't think about it. So it's super important for us. And it's important for us to treat it that way, and to set the boundaries of who we share that information with, so that we're actually getting reactions from people that are positive and that are towards people who care about it. I'm not going to market this towards an ISTJ or like someone who doesn't care about personality types, because like, why would they care? Why would they care about this? They're not going to care about what an INTP is. I'm marketing this towards INTPs, and I'm talking to you, and I'm trying to help you, because you're the person that's going to care about this. You're going to listen and hopefully use this. So that gets into whole other things about like the drama triangle and stuff, but that's too much right now. So just understand that each function is tied to another function in some way, and they're not operating on their own. And ideally, the flow state that we want to get into in our lives is using these functions, kind of flowing between them in our lives, and integrating them in some way. So using introverted thinking and extroverted intuition to develop our strengths, so that our weaknesses come along with it and we grow as a person, and understanding when we're ignoring functions to pretend. Basically, when things go bad, we are operating as if the functions operate by themselves. If extroverted feeling is just being extroverted feeling, then we're a crying, sobbing, yelling mess. If introverted thinking is operating by itself, then we are an absolute cold jerk that is spitting truth to everyone, regardless of how it's going to make them feel. If we are just being extroverted intuitive, then we are distracted by everything and we are not making decisions. And if we are just using introverted sensing by itself, then we are sitting in a cubby, just playing video games, playing the same video game over and over again, never moving, and probably just eating chips and not living our lives. So integrating these different aspects of ourselves is incredibly important to find ways to move forward. And listening to the needs that we have, the impulses that we have to shift from introversion to extroversion to be able to move forward.